El Faro had newer Hurricane Joaquin information on board, but its captain relied on an older storm track. And that gap became the first link in a chain. 33 people died when El Faro sank near the eye of Hurricane Joaquin on October 1st, 2015. The familiar version sounds simple. A cargo ship sailed too close to a hurricane. The investigation found something more disturbing. El Faro had professional officers, satellite communications, multiple weather products, procedures, and a shoreside safety system. Pieces of the right answer were already aboard, but they never became one effective decision. First, the bridge worked from weather information that lagged the storm. Then, officers' concerns failed to change the route soon enough. Water entered below deck. The ship developed a sustained list. That list moved lubricating oil away from the main engine's suction system. Propulsion failed. More openings became vulnerable to the sea. This was not one mistake followed by one consequence. It was a sequence in which every failure changed the ship and made the next failure easier. The first question is how a modern bridge can possess newer information while still navigating with an older picture. One bridge tool was the Bon Voyage system, or BVS. It displayed the route and storm together and delivered graphical files to the captain's email. It was convenient. It was also not necessarily showing the newest National Hurricane Center position available at that moment. Another system aboard, SAT-C, delivered more current text information. Both systems could be useful. They were not interchangeable. The National Transportation Safety Board found that El Faro was receiving enough information for route decisions. It also concluded that up-to-date weather information was available aboard, but the captain did not use the most current information for decision-making. The report says he likely did not understand that SAT-C was more current than BVS. That distinction matters. This is not evidence that he opened a perfect forecast, understood it, and deliberately rejected it. It is evidence that information freshness was not obvious enough, and training had not made the difference between the products clear enough. The ship had the newer data. The bridge's working picture still lagged the storm, and the officers around the captain could see that the margin was disappearing. El Faro's voyage data recorder was eventually recovered from more than 15,000 feet below the Atlantic. It preserved more than 26 hours of bridge audio and parametric data. That record does not show a silent bridge. Other officers compared sources, discussed Joaquin, expressed concern, and proposed route changes. But authority on a ship is not evenly distributed. Officers could suggest. The captain decided. Bridge resource management is supposed to turn concern into an operational challenge that command must hear, test, and resolve. On El Faro, that process was ineffective. The NTSB found that the captain did not adequately consider the officer's suggestion. It also concluded that more assertive statements from the deck officers might have improved his awareness. Fragments of the right picture existed across people and systems. The bridge never assembled them into action soon enough. That delay mattered because a hurricane is not a dot on a map, and every hour removed another route the ship could still physically take. When the voyage began, Joaquin was still a tropical storm. The captain intended to remain south of it and continue along the familiar Jacksonville to San Juan route. That plan works only if the storm remains where the route picture says it will be. Joaquin did not. It strengthened and moved in a way that steadily closed the space between the ship and the hurricane. A cyclone is a moving field of wind, waves, rain, and pressure. Avoiding its predicted centerline does not guarantee safe condition. The captain later attempted a route through Crooked Island Passage. By then, avoiding the storm required a more drastic change than it had earlier. That is how shrinking margin traps accrue. Early action can look unnecessarily cautious. Later action looks obviously necessary, but the physical option may already be disappearing. By the final morning, El Faro was near Joaquin's eye. The information failure had delivered the ship into the storm. Now a small opening below deck would begin changing the machinery itself. El Faro began taking on water. The NTSB identified flooding in a cargo hold from an undetected open watertight scuttle and damaged seawater piping as contributors to the sinking. A scuttle is a small access opening. Watertight describes the boundary only when that opening is closed. The crew worked to control the flooding, but the vessel developed a sustained list, a persistent lean to one side. At first, list appears to be a consequence. Water enters, weight shifts, and the deck tilts. Inside a ship, list is also a new operating condition. Fluids move, suction points change relative to liquid levels, openings approach the sea, machinery designed around a level deck can lose the geometry it depends upon. El Faro's list therefore became the cause of the next failure. The ship did not have to run out of fuel. The engine did not have to run out of oil. The oil only had to move away from the place where the engine could use it. The main propulsion plant depended on lubricating oil reaching its pump pickup at sufficient pressure. The oil reduced friction, carried away heat, and protected moving surfaces. Imagine a shallow pan with a drinking straw fixed near one side. When the pan is level, the straw remains submerged. Tilt the pan far enough, and the liquid moves away from the straw, even though plenty of liquid remains elsewhere. The NTSB found that El Faro lost propulsion because the sustained list led to low lubricating oil pressure to the main engine. That is the episode's central mechanical contradiction. The ship could still have fuel, an engine, and lubricating oil, yet lose propulsion because the deck beneath the system was no longer level enough for it to function as intended. And inside a hurricane, propulsion is more than forward speed. It lets the bridge control how the hull meets wind and waves. When the engine stopped helping the ship resist the storm, the list and flooding were no longer separate problems. They began reinforcing each other. Without propulsion, El Faro lost a crucial means of controlling its heading relative to the wind and sea. The flooding remained, the list continued. Ships are divided by boundaries intended to limit the spread of water, but those boundaries contain ventilation systems and other openings required for normal operation. As El Faro's attitude worsened, unsecured ventilation closures allowed subsequent downflooding into cargo holds. Water could now reach spaces that were not part of the initial flooding problem. The failure had become a loop. Flooding increased the list. The list compromised propulsion. Loss of propulsion reduced control in severe conditions. The worsening attitude exposed more openings. More water increased the list again. Recovery was no longer one repair. It was a race against several coupled systems, deteriorating at once. The NTSB also found that El Faro lacked an approved damage control plan that could have helped the crew recognize the severity of the condition and respond. A plan cannot guarantee survival, but it can reveal when separate-looking problems are actually one accelerating system. By the time the emergency was declared, the crew was not escaping one failure. They were trapped inside the completed chain. The captain reported flooding, a list of roughly 10 to 15 degrees, and loss of propulsion. The decision to muster the crew came late. Even then, survival equipment had to function in hurricane conditions. The NTSB found that the lack of appropriate survival craft for those conditions contributed to the loss of life. All 33 people aboard died. The voyage data recorder gives the investigation unusual detail, but that detail should not turn the final hours into spectacle. Its value is that it exposes the safety chain. Which information arrived? what people understood, how concerns moved through the bridge when the physical failures appeared, and which safeguards were still available. The investigation did not stop at the captain, because a system that depends upon one person perfectly integrating every imperfect signal is already carrying too much risk in one place. The NTSB found inadequate company oversight and an inadequate safety management system. It examined training on weather products, voyage planning, bridge, resource management, damage control, machinery, closures, and survival craft. Those are not unrelated administrative findings. Each one corresponds to a link in the physical chain. The system must make current information distinguishable from stale information. It must train officers to convert concern into an effective challenge. It must preserve watertight boundaries. It must account for machinery limits when the ship is listed. It must provide damage control guidance and survival equipment appropriate to the environment. When those layers are weak, the final decision on the bridge carries more weight than one human decision should ever have to carry. The old weather picture did not directly stop the engine. The open scuttle did not determine the route. Low oil pressure did not explain why the ship was near Joaquin. Each failure handed the vessel to the next one with less margin. So what sank El Faro? The NTSB's probable cause statement begins with insufficient action to avoid Hurricane Joaquin, failure to use the most current weather information, and a late muster. It also identifies ineffective bridge resource management, inadequate company oversight and safety management, cargo hold flooding, damaged piping, propulsion loss from list-induced low lubricating oil pressure, downflooding through ventilation closures, the absence of an approved damage control plan, and survival craft unsuited to the conditions. That list is not indecision. It is the mechanism. El Faro was lost because the bridge's working picture lagged the storm. Challenge did not change the route soon enough. Water entered, the ship leaned. The lean disabled propulsion. New paths opened to the sea, and the remaining safeguards could not recover the vessel or the people aboard. The newer forecast was already on board. The tragedy is that the entire safety system was not arranged to make that fact decisive while there was still time. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.